As soon as I stepped into the courtroom, Melissa couldn't stop a nervous laugh from slipping out, while Gregory just shook his head like I was some kind of punchline. Meanwhile, the judge went white as a sheet when he laid eyes on me. His gavel slid right out of his grasp as he murmured a single word, a name that meant nothing to anyone in the room: the scalpel. He couldn't look away, clearly spooked. My family thought they were simply setting aside an old man's ramblings, not realizing they were nettling a ghost from days long gone. It all kicked off, like these things tend to, with a snide remark I should have shrugged off. We were having one of those drawn-out Sunday dinners. I was seated at the very end of this massive mahogany table that stretched on like a runway. Melissa and her husband, Greg Walsh, had us over at their sprawling LA mansion. "The infinity pool, it's a necessity, Greg," Melissa declared, all bossy-like. "It should look like it's just slipping over the edge into the canyon." Greg, who never seemed to leave his too fancy, too tight suits, barely glanced away from his phone. "Anything you want, babe. Once I nail this Ohio deal, we could fill it with champagne." He loved to brag about his so-called big wins, a deal worth hundreds of millions apparently in the bag. Meanwhile, they chattered above me about pool designers and glitzy charity events, like I was some dusty old chair they didn't know what to do with. I'm Nathaniel Price, 71, and to them, I was invisible. It's been a decade since Isabel, my wife, passed, and I did what seemed right. I sold off that big Connecticut house filled with too many memories and moved into the guest house on their huge property to be near my daughter. Isabel's only kid. It's what she would have wanted. Tyler, my 16-year-old grandson, was the only one who ever seemed to notice I was around. "Grandpa," he called over, "my playoff game's next week. Want to come watch? We're going up against Palisades." Before I could say a word, Greg cut in, not even glancing my way. "Tyler, don't bother Grandpa. He needs to rest. Old age, you know." Melissa added her bit with that sharp giggle of hers. "Greg's right, sweetie. Let him be. He probably needs a nap after all this sitting around." They judged everything about me without bothering to ask how much energy I had, what I wanted, who I was. I just stayed quiet, looking at my plate, the asparagus getting as cold as the room felt, a ghost haunting my life. And I let it happen, mistaking silence for patience when it was really just giving up. 3 days later, there was a firm knock on my guest house door. It was Greg. This was rare. He usually stayed clear of my place because it lacked the bling of his own abode. He stuffed a ridiculously expensive wine bottle in my hands and flashed that slimy salesman grin of his. "This is the good stuff, Nate," he beamed. He knew I didn't drink anymore, not since my doctor had me lay off the booze after heart surgery. This wasn't a nice gesture, it was performance. Greg was always selling. After some chit-chat about the weather, he came right out with it. "Nate, I'm looking at this golden opportunity, a resort gig in Ohio but hit a tiny bump with some red tape. I just need a temporary loan to show we've got the funds, a bridge to tide us over. You own this guest house free and clear. It's just sitting here. Just put up a bit, $500,000. Sensing I wasn't biting, he leaned in heavier. 6 months, max. You get $700,000 back. That's a neat 40% gain, Nate. Nowhere else will do you better." I watched him, his enthusiasm teetering on panic, a faint sheen of sweat on his brow. "Greg," I started, keeping my voice steady. "I'm 71. I'm not interested in gambling. My money's for my retirement, my health. It's a no-go, Greg." The change was sudden. His smile dropped, and I saw something cold and sly in his eyes. "Unbelievable," he sneered. "Just unbelievable. After all we've given you, and you live here without paying rent." "I bought this house, Greg," I corrected him quietly. "And you won't even help your own family." "God, you're a selfish old man," he snapped. "He acts like I'm crashing here for free." But he's either oblivious or conveniently forgets. When I bought this guest house 10 years ago, it wasn't just a simple real estate purchase. Along with the house, I acquired the 2 acres it stands on, and the massive mansion next door sits on my land because of a 99-year lease I control, only costing them $1 a year. The guy who lives there doesn't even realize he's basically on my property. The other night, he angrily chucked a wine bottle onto my coffee table, making me jump in surprise. "You'll regret being so selfish, old man," he snapped, before storming out and slamming the door so hard that the picture of Isabel on my desk wobbled. About a week later, I was jolted awake at 3 a.m. by a dull pain spreading from my chest down my arm. It wasn't the sharp jab of a heart attack, but the familiar squeeze of angina. My doctor had warned me that stress could trigger it. "Don't try toughing it out, Nate. Get help if you need it," he'd advised. So I called the main house hoping Melissa would pick up. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding sleepy and annoyed. "Dad, do you know what time it is?" she grumbled. "I'm feeling a bit off, sweetheart," I said, trying to stay composed. "Got some chest pains. Not too severe, but mind giving me a lift to the clinic just in case?" Her annoyed sigh echoed through the phone. "Dad, the charity gala meeting is first thing. The committee's coming over. I can't deal with this right now. Call 911 if it's serious, but don't exaggerate." Click. The line went dead. She didn't even ask how bad it was. No concern if I was scared. Just that I was making a fuss. The tightness in my chest went beyond a physical ailment. It pierced something deeper. I ordered an Uber and sat in the back of a Prius as a stranger took me to the ER. The doctors diagnosed me with stress-induced angina, handed me a nitroglycerin tablet, watched over me for a few hours, then sent me home by 9 a.m. I rode back in another Uber, and as we approached the mansion gates, I noticed Melissa's shiny Range Rover parked, not at the main house, but the Beverly Hills Spa, her charity meeting spot. They didn't just neglect me. To them, I was nothing more than an inconvenience, a resource to be used and forgotten. That was the jolt I needed to see that things had to change, though I had no idea how quickly events were about to turn. The next morning, while savoring a black coffee and watching the fog peel away from the canyon, a sharp, professional knock snapped the tranquility. This wasn't Greg's overbearing knock. This one meant business. Standing at the door was a sharply dressed man, holding a digital scanner and a stiff white envelope. "Nathaniel Price," he confirmed in a flat tone. "Legal express delivery. Sign here, please." I signed, took the envelope, and he disappeared before I could close the door. Inside were papers weighted with something much heavier. I picked up the letter opener, Isabel's gift from decades ago, and slit the envelope. The words were stark and biting. A legal petition. Filed in Los Angeles Superior Court by Gregory and Melissa Walsh against me. I flipped to the first page, heart pounding. An emergency hearing was set. They were seeking a conservatorship. No shock, no panic, just icy calm. They claimed I, Nathaniel Price, was mentally unfit, that I couldn't handle my own financial and medical affairs. It wasn't just an insult or greed. It was an attempt to erase me, to make me disappear as a person. They wanted control, to reduce me to a mere puppet, to make it legally so I didn't exist. I kept reading, to Exhibit A, their so-called evidence. A psychologist's report, Dr. Peter Lim. It accused me of dementia, delusions, and a lack of financial know-how, labeling me a threat to myself and my property. But Dr. Peter Lim? A dry laugh left me, a name I've never heard, never met him once in my lifetime. Determined, I grabbed the legal papers, their stark white sheets contrasting my aged hands, and marched across the carefully tended lawn that separated us. Straight towards the main house, ready to face this head-on. The patio doors were propped wide open, letting the clinking sound of ice in glasses and some forgettable music drift out. As I'd guessed, They were chilling by the pool. Melissa was sprawled on a lounge chair, her sunglasses resting on a magazine on her belly. Greg was nearby at the bar, busy fixing himself another drink. They seemed totally relaxed, like hunters waiting for their prey to drop. I walked onto the patio, and the music cut off. My shadow loomed over Melissa, making her sit up fast, her sunglasses pushed down her nose. "Dad, what are you doing here? You're messing with our—" She stopped talking as soon as she saw the papers in my hand. She didn't look me in the eye, just stared at the documents. Greg turned with a phony grin slapped on his face. "Nate, we were just—" He cut off when he saw the petition, his grin turning into a sneer before he quickly wiped it away, trying to look concerned. I waved the envelope. "What is this?" Melissa looked away, towards the pool, not meeting my eye. But Greg, he was good at this game. He put down his drink, dried his hands on a towel, and crossed his arms like he was in charge. "Dad," he said, sweetening his words with fake friendliness, "we didn't want you to find out like this. We were going to talk to you before the hearing." "What is this about?" I demanded. Greg moved in closer, trying to be the voice of reason. "It's for your benefit," he explained. "After last week's heart scare, Melissa and I decided you need help. You're forgetting things, getting confused." "It was just heartburn, Greg," I countered, but he brushed it aside like it didn't matter. "That's how you see it. But you were in pain, out of it. What if it gets worse next time? You need someone to manage your finances, make sure your bills are taken care of, and handle medical decisions before you put yourself in danger." He was twisting things, manipulating the whole event they didn't bother with to make me look incapable. I turned to my daughter. "Melissa, is this what you want? To declare your father not capable in writing?" Finally, she looked at me, but her eyes had that cold pool water glint. "We're doing what's best for you, Dad. It's because we care." "Care," I repeated, the word feeling sour. "You don't know what that really is." That was when Greg's polite act slipped. The mask of a concerned son-in-law dropped, and the schemer beneath showed through. He laughed, the sound sharp and unpleasant. "See you in court, old man," he mocked. "This just proves our point. You're being paranoid, just like Dr. Lim said." He raised his drink in a sarcastic gesture. "You'll need a public defender, 'cause I doubt you can pay for a real lawyer." That was it. That was when the old, confused version of me they thought they'd overpowered disappeared. Something unexpected came to life within me. I headed back to the guest house. As I shut the door, the click of the lock felt incredibly loud. It was a barrier now, solid and not to be crossed. They assumed this was just a place for an old guy, a bland space for me to nap, to be overlooked, forgotten. They didn't have a clue. You know, until that moment I hadn't really seen it, but there it was. Hidden at the back of my walk-in closet, snuggled behind a line of dusty old suits, was another door. But this wasn't any ordinary door. It was secured with a high-tech fingerprint scanner. I pressed my thumb on the cool glass sensor, and it lit up green. The lock gave a satisfying little click. Past that door, there was no comfy chair or bed to be found. What filled the space were floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with books, a trio of huge computer monitors, file cabinets lining the wall, and a super-advanced, secure satellite phone system. It was my true haven, untouched and serene. To the world, and especially to Greg, I was just a simple retired accountant, the typical guy who crunched numbers for a company in Connecticut for years. They thought my life peaked with having enough money to retire comfortably, but Greg was clueless. About 3 decades ago in Washington, D.C., nobody called me Nate. The big shots, CEOs, crooked senators, big players in politics, they knew me by another name. I was the Scalpel. Back then, I was the Department of Justice's top forensic investigator, the one they called when the financial statements didn't just seem off, they were downright impossible. It wasn't just a matter of following the money for me, I ripped it apart. I was the one who uncovered hidden accounts and found those secret ledgers everyone else couldn't see. I could turn a simple spreadsheet into a cause for arrest. I sent a dozen top executives to prison. Then I decided to step back. That part of me was put to rest the day my wife, Isabel, was diagnosed. I swapped my fast-paced office and thrilling pursuits for hospital visits and keeping track of chemotherapy appointments. No regrets about that choice. Suddenly, I was only a husband, then a widower trying to fix things with a daughter I barely knew, and eventually, a forgotten granddad. The whole scalpel side of me faded because my family needed Nate more. But now, Greg and my daughter presented a reason to bring that part of me back. I settled in my chair, ignored my usual phone, and grabbed my secure line. With a steady hand, I dialed an 11-digit number I hadn't used in 10 years, but still remembered perfectly. After 2 rings, a sharp, no-nonsense voice answered. Avery Hayes. Avery, I greeted. It's Nate Price. Her recognition, the surprise, I could almost feel it in the air. Mr. Price, she responded, sounding startled. We all thought you'd disappeared. My dad's always wondering about the scalpel. I'm in Los Angeles, Avery. I need you here tomorrow. Bring only the best. People who can uncover things, I said firmly. The pause was shorter now, her initial shock turning into the determination I knew so well. Just tell me what's going on, Nate, she asked, clearly focused now. They're aiming for conservatorship, claiming I've gone off the deep end, trying to snatch everything, I explained, keeping my voice calm. There was a quick, incredulous laugh on the line. They think you've lost it? They have no idea who they're dealing with, she said, seriously now. Got it, Scalpel. I'm on my way. So where do we start? Avery arrived promptly at 10 a.m. No dazzling car or designer bag for her. She was all business in a sharp pantsuit, hair pulled back, eyes cold as ice. Her briefcase had only the essentials. She was a stark contrast to Gregory Walsh. Avery was substance over style, must run in the family. Skipping pleasantries, she observed the servers, the screens, the locked cabinets, nodded. They really have no clue, do they? She stated, rather than asked. They see me as just some old guy, I said, smoothly handing over the petition. Exhibit A, Dr. Peter Lim. Avery scanned the paper, her eyes catching the signature. Dr. Peter Lim, psychological evaluation. Got it, she said, grabbing her tablet and springing into action. Give me 3 hours, she said confidently. You've got 2, I countered. She smirked, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Count on a call in 1, she said, slipping out as quietly as she'd come. I didn't just wait around. For an hour, I dove into my own digging, mapping out the financial architecture of Walsh Holdings GP and the LLCs Greg had set. I was assembling the skeleton. Avery'd bring it to life. 58 minutes in, the secure line buzzed. I picked it up. Nate here. Avery, that was fast. Wasn't difficult, she replied, her voice sharp and clinical. Messy things just need the right tug. Nate, you're not gonna believe this. Shoot. First, Dr. Peter Lim isn't a psychologist. I stayed quiet, waiting for the punchline. Not a psychiatrist, no neurologist either, not even a regular doc. I sensed a twist. What is he, Avery? A dentist. The word hung there. A dentist. Guys who handle teeth. Yet this was the guy who claimed I wasn't all there. What nerve. A dentist, I echoed. Or used to be, Avery added. Lost his license 5 years back with the California Dental Board. Now we were getting somewhere. Why? I asked. Her typing echoed through the phone. So here's the deal. We're dealing with all kinds of shady business here. There's insurance fraud, fake surgeries, and pumping out prescriptions for opioids illegally. Basically, this guy was running a pill operation out of a strip mall over in Reseda. Greg wasn't looking for a good guy to help. He found a total con artist, a washed-up, desperate former professional willing to do anything. This set up a major aha moment. "Avery," I said, getting closer, "that's pretty specific stuff. You don't just stumble onto that info. Greg's a big-time real estate guy. There's no way he just bumped into a disgraced dentist by accident. How'd he find him?" "You're right," Avery replied, her voice getting tense. "It wasn't a casual encounter or anything like that. It was money-related." "Tell me more." "I'm going over Lim's criminal records. 5 years back when they nabbed him, he was facing 10 felony charges. His bail was set at $100,000. He couldn't pay it." "And?" I whispered, my mind already racing. "Exactly. A bail bondsman had to post the bail, but they needed someone to guarantee it, someone willing to put up collateral if Lim ever skipped town." That uneasy feeling settled in my gut, and it wasn't my heart condition this time. "Who fronted that bail, Avery?" She paused just enough for the impact to hit. "A shell company, an LLC from Delaware," she said, "built just to manage assets." "What's it called?" I pushed, though I could guess. "Walsh Holdings GP," she disclosed. Oh man. I leaned back, trying to piece it all together. The puzzle fit, but not just snugly, more like a collision. Greg didn't just run into Dr. Lim lately. He hadn't tossed him a bribe last month. Greg had him under his thumb for 5 years, covering his bail, and probably his lawyer too, keeping this crooked asset handy for when he really needed it. Now I saw the whole ugly plan. This wasn't some spontaneous bit of greed just because I nixed his loan offer. That was just the warm-up. This was the long game, setting me up as incompetent to snatch my assets. For years. "Avery," I said, my voice now firm, "you've blown up their main strategy. You took down their so-called expert witness. Now it's my turn. Keep digging through the legal mess. Find out everything about Lim's court stuff. Track down the lawyer Greg hired for him. I'll tackle the money side." She gave me a nod and headed back out. "Watch your step, Scalpel," she said. "They should have been more careful," I shot back as I shut my office door, the world shrinking to just the glow from my computer screens. This was home, not that silent guest house, but right here in the digital world. Greg pegged me as old school, stuck with paper and ink finance. He probably pictured guys in green visor hats updating ledgers. What threw him was the thought of someone like me, a tech-savvy entity ready to mess with any server he dabbled with. My focus first was the entity that paid for Lim's bail, Walsh Holdings GP. Of course, it was a Delaware-based LLC, all quiet and cloaked in layers of secrecy. Greg wasn't good with details, but he wasn't entirely clueless. He'd figured out the basics, like nesting companies. Walsh Holdings went into Ojai Crest Properties LLC, which then folded into the Walsh Family Trust. It was like Russian nesting dolls, all crafted to keep the real boss hidden. But here's where it goes wrong: recklessness. His arrogance, hurriedness, and stinginess resulted in one big mess. Every registration, every filing in Delaware and California, every bank account, all tied back to the same old personal email, gregwalsh@hotmail.com. It's like he figured it was buried long ago, just blown away by the wind. What Greg didn't see coming was just how stubborn those old email servers can be. I wasn't trying to crack open his inbox. Doing that would go too far and break the law. I wanted to keep things legit and clean. My goal? To map out his network of connections, see who he was rubbing shoulders with. So, I plugged that outdated email into a bunch of databases where I still had sneaky access. A DOJ artifact, forgotten, but still handy. My mission? Track the patterns, pin down who he was dealing with money-wise. It wasn't long before, 20 minutes, tops, I struck gold. The email was tied to a special data hub for swapping juicy financial docs with folks in private equity, Citadel Apex Capital. Not your average local bank. These guys were like vultures. Lending to stable businesses? Nope. They were after people like Greg, folks every other banker would leave well alone. And they handed them support that came with a hefty weight tied to it. Now, I couldn't crack open the data vault, but I got my hands on the server logs, which showed file names and email subjects. Honestly, that's all I needed. Greg's big, high-risk project in Ojai was falling apart. It wasn't a little stumble. It was like a pressure cooker getting ready to blow. The money vanished before the project even hit halfway, and those liquidity reports? Total fiction. Contractors were breathing down his neck, prepared to slap liens on him. This wasn't some minor glitch. $50 million just up and disappeared, and Citadel Apex saw through the act. Once friendly emails turned into a panic, with default notices flowing like a river. Then emails got personal. Greg, desperate, begging for just 2 more months, claiming it was just a tiny cash flow hiccup. The final email cleared up the whole mess. This one was from Citadel Apex, dated just a week after I turned down Greg's offer for a $500K loan. A capital call. They weren't just mildly annoyed. They were bringing out the big guns, all locked and loaded. They wanted not what Greg asked for, but $5 million cold hard cash, due in just 10 business days. If Greg defaulted, it wouldn't just wipe out the Ojai deal. An all-encompassing clause loomed, one Greg probably ignored, that threatened everything. Walsh Holdings, the nice mansion, Melissa's SUV, every dime within Greg's grasp was up for grabs. Suddenly, everything clicked with a chilling clarity. Greg wasn't just after the $500K. He needed a stopgap to buy time before his whole world tumbled down. My refusal triggered his backup plan he'd had on ice for ages. He wasn't eyeing a new guest house or touching my retirement fund. Bankruptcy was breathing down his neck, and he was aiming for the prize, my entire estate. Greg believed that what he was doing was worth way more than the $500,000 he initially sought. He was ready to liquidate everything I had, not to bankroll some resort as he claimed, but to patch up his own disaster. This wasn't just a grab for my money. It was betrayal, an attempt to rescue himself at my cost. As I tried to piece it all together, a cold realization hit me hard. Greg faced bankruptcy, a $5 million demand, nearly crushed by debt. How did he find the cash to file a lawsuit against me? Even a lousy suit like his doesn't come cheap. Lawyers need money up front, and dragging someone like Dr. Lim into it, notorious as he is, would need immediate funds, not some pie-in-the-sky promise. Greg was practically broke, so where in the world did he find $50,000 or more to launch this legal attack? My mind wandered back to that Sunday dinner when Greg bragged about his big score to Melissa. What was that stuff she was going on about? Oh yeah, her charity, a pool party, a fancy gala. The realization hit me like a rock sinking into water. After Isabel passed, I had used part of the sale from our Connecticut home, several $1,000,000, on a charity, the Isabel Price Foundation. Its purpose was to focus on early-stage cancer research, something that might have saved her. I had installed Melissa as the one to run it. I thought it would be her way to keep a connection with the mother she lost, to give her life more meaning. Although I was the charity's official founder and had the rights to keep an eye on things, I never actually did. I put all my faith in Melissa. It was my wife's legacy. It was meant for our daughter. I wasted no time in reaching out to the bank in Boston that handled the foundation's funds. The banker on the other end sounded surprised when he realized it was me. "Mr. Price, it's unexpected hearing from you. We usually get updates from Melissa." My reply was frosty. "I'm using the rights of the founder today. I need every single expense and money transfer logged from the foundation over the past year, and I need it sent over in the next 5 minutes. Make sure it's secure, I commanded. The banker hesitated a moment. That might take more than a few minutes, sir. But I was adamant. 5 minutes, I asserted, and hung up. Just 3 minutes passed when my inbox pinged. The document was there, attached. With determination, I opened it. The foundation was supposed to hold over $3 million, but the statement only showed $412,000. As I scrolled through, my heart sank. The money wasn't flowing as intended for noble goals like funding research grants and hospices. Instead, huge sums were listed as admin fees, consulting charges, and event planning costs. A whopping $150,000 recently went to Walsh Holdings GP, Greg's firm. Greg had been siphoning charity funds meant for a cause in his wife's name. Another $80,000 was listed for gala planning to a company called LA Premier Events LLC. A hasty online search revealed it was nothing more than a shell company, established only a few months back with nothing but a P.O. box for an address and Greg's name tied to it. Greg had taken $80,000 for setting up his own celebration. But the worst part wasn't those glaring entries, it was in the endorsement of the checks. Scanned copies provided by the bank for any transaction over $20,000 showed that the checks permitting the $150,000 transfer to Walsh Holdings and $80,000 to LA Premier Events weren't signed by Greg at all. They carried Melissa's signature. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had anticipated deceit from Greg. He was always scheming. I had feared Melissa might be naive, perhaps misled or manipulated by him. But this was not some tale of gullibility. It was a conscious betrayal, a joint effort in draining her mother's legacy. Her signature on those checks made it all too clear. Melissa wasn't just a pawn. She was actively stealing from funds meant to help cancer patients, using her own mother's name to do it. Later, after all those revelations, I reached out to my old friend Jim. Usually our talks revolved around old times, but this time was different. It was urgent. I need your help, I said directly. There was a pause, Jim likely piecing things together in his mind, shifting to the seriousness of the situation. All right, Nate, he said, now in full problem-solving mode. How can I assist? My daughter is trying to destroy me, I confessed, the bitterness unmistakable in my tone. She's teaming up with her husband, using my late wife's money to back their lawyers. They're claiming I'm insane. Jim whistled low. That's a hefty mess, he said after a beat. What do you need from me? Citadel Apex Capital, I responded, letting the weight of the name do its work. You're tied with them, and I need to leverage that to push back. Jim was quiet, probably considering my words. Finally, he spoke. Nate, I'm on it. I will pay back what I owe you. Provide me the details, and I'll ensure that fund feels the pressure you're going to bring. Thank you, Jim, I said, feeling a slight lift amid the turmoil. I knew I could count on you. I've got your back, Nate, just like you had mine in the past. We'll get this sorted, Jim assured me. His readiness to jump into the fray took me by surprise, his willingness to offer help without needing to think twice. I ended the call with a strange sense of satisfaction. The battle was mine to fight now, and with Jim's support, I wouldn't be stumbling blindly. I returned my focus to Avery. Get that writ prepped. We'll soon have what we need, I instructed, feeling my resolve solidify. Avery, ever professional and efficient, replied, Consider it done, Nate. Her voice left no room for uncertainty. With everything in motion, I knew the next phase would hit hard and fast, but I was prepared. They'd underestimated our tenacity and strength, and now they'd learn what that mistake would cost. There was a storm brewing, and we were poised to turn it into mere dust. Without sugarcoating it, I reminded him, I'm calling in a favor. There was a beat, then a straightforward query. What do you require? There's this guy, Gregory Walsh. He's defaulted on an Ohio project. gone under. As Walsh's name flashed on Jim's screen, I listened to the familiar clatter of keys. "Ah, here we go," Jim muttered. "A $50 million disaster. We're set to grab this guy's assets come Monday. What an idiot." I cut in quickly. "Jim, hold off on that. Give me a shot instead. Sell me the whole mess, all the debt, every dime. I want the loan, the collateral, the whole shebang." "You're serious, Nate? That debt's like playing with poison," he warned me. "I'm not trying to invest, Jim. I want the reins, to be the one in charge as his sole creditor." Jim sighed, likely remembering past favors. Okay. You bailed me out once. Returning the favor is the least I can do. Give me an hour to sort things and it's yours." "You're a lifesaver, Jim." "No, Nate. It's you doing me a solid. Good luck with this hunt." He hung up the line. I immediately dialed Avery. "It's all set," I said. "I own the debt now. Citadel Apex is out." Her voice nearly shook with surprise. "Seriously, Nate? You actually bought his debt? Guess that makes you his new bank." "Not quite, Avery," I corrected her with a smirk. "Consider me his worst nightmare now. Get that writ of seizure ready. Gregory owes me $5 million, and I want it all. His mansion, the cars, every piece of Walsh Holdings, LLC. "I'll have someone serve him quickly," she offered. "Wait," I interrupted. "Hold that thought. He's banking on me losing it completely. He won't see it coming, because we won't give him any advance warnings." I checked the docket for court dates. "We'll serve this bombshell to him right in court." We found ourselves standing in a dimly lit hallway outside courtroom 5B. Avery was by my side, calm as ever with her briefcase, a small case packed with big consequences. "You ready for this, Nate?" she asked. I adjusted my cuffs, trading my usual sweaters for something more assertive, a sharp charcoal gray suit tailored just for days like this. The last time I wore this was facing down the Senate Banking Committee. Still fitting like a glove, I showed up crisp and clean, not the man they expected to see. I'm more than ready. The courtroom doors creaked open to reveal a stark space smelling faintly of stale coffee and a touch of bleach, a crossroads for people's fates. Sitting inside were Greg and Melissa, buzzing with anticipation. Their slick attorney was shuffling through documents, a picture of confidence. Their eyes landed on me. Melissa caught a glimpse of me first, a slight smile tugging at her lips as she whispered to Greg. I could hear her tease, "Does Dad think he's at a wake or something?" Greg's eyes swept my polished look, his amusement barely concealed. To him, it might have seemed I was trying to mask some desperate last gasp. Their lawyer's glance was dismissive, sizing me up only to dismiss me as a shadow of past prowess, then returned to his agenda. I sat opposite them, Avery placing her range of legal tools between us with silent assurance. We waited in steady anticipation. "All rise," the bailiff droned from habit. We stood as the judge entered, his steps tired with too many of these motions. His badge read, Judge John Carmichael. The judge began, his voice low with disinterest. "Good morning. Today we're gathered for—" Eyes drifted back to the doctor as the room hung on his words. "In my professional opinion," Dr. Lim declared with feigned concern, "Mr. Price isn't fit to manage his affairs." Every gaze snapped to me, the setup closing in tight. This was a sham through and through, a grab for power using folks like Lim as their tools. The judge stayed silent, his eyes shifting to Fierro and Greg, the pressure from his stare demanding truth wordlessly. Fierro clung to his veneer of calm, though his voice faltered under the scrutiny. "Thank you, doctor," he mumbled, trying for composure. "No more questions." Without a pause, the judge addressed me directly, his voice cutting the tension like a hot knife. "Mr. Price, do you wish to cross-examine the witness?" Smelling blood, I saw my opening, the whole plan coming undone. "Yes, Your Honor," I responded, standing purposefully, my every move saying I was in control. As I neared Dr. Lim, the sweat on his forehead shone brightly, a small victory of its own. Dr. Lim, I began smoothly, my voice steady and slicing through the courtroom air. In your assessments, are you aware of my background as a witness in major financial cases? Lim shifted awkwardly in his chair. No, that didn't come under the assessment. How handy for you, I shot back, making sure my sarcasm hit its mark. So, this diagnosis of my mental state, it was solely based on your tests, or were there other things involved? It was based on tests, he muttered, his gaze fixed firmly on the floor. I inhaled deeply, raising my voice to reach throughout the courtroom. And you're entirely confident in the reliability of these tests? Lim fiddled nervously with his glasses, caught off guard. Well, no test is foolproof. But you were ready to label me as incapable, I jumped in, my words tearing through his flimsy defenses. The room erupted in hushed chatter, eyes darting back and forth from the judge to Lim and then to me. The judge, lounging back slightly with eyes narrowing as if trying to solve a riddle, chimed in. Dr. Lim, could other elements have skewed your findings? Lim opened and closed his mouth, struggling to find the right words in front of a crowd no longer easily misled. The judge redirected his focus to me. Mr. Price, he addressed, do you have any more questions? I took a brief pause before replying with certainty, not right now, Your Honor. As I settled back into my seat, a shift in the room was undeniable. What started as a strategic takedown was now a desperate attempt to steer the story. The whole truth wasn't out yet, but it was about to be revealed. With a more businesslike demeanor restored, the judge called out, Mr. Walsh, please take the stand. Greg Walsh stood up, trying to hold himself in check as he slowly headed to the witness stand. The air was thick with anticipation. Judge Carmichael motioned for him to sit and then leaned in, offering a scrutinizing look. Mr. Walsh, the judge began, his voice edged with doubt. You're aware you're under oath, just like Mr. Lim? Greg nodded, a single drop of sweat tracing a path down his brow. Yes, Your Honor. All right, let's hear your side of this unfortunate confusion, the judge's words heavy with sarcasm. Greg cleared his throat, sneaking a glance at his lawyer. Your Honor, I wasn't aware of any misdeeds. Dr. Lim, Mr. Lim was recommended to me as a specialist, but I ended up putting my faith in the wrong people. Avery Hayes, who had been silently observing, now stood taller. Mr. Walsh, are you claiming complete ignorance of the $25,000 your company paid Mr. Lim? Greg stumbled, trying to find his footing. I deal with a lot of transactions, Ms. Hayes. It's plausible that, well, not directly, no. With a skeptical eyebrow raise, Avery's voice remained composed yet piercing. So, you're saying Walsh Holdings can make $25,000 deals without your express knowledge or approval? Greg squirmed under her gaze. I didn't sign off on anything shady, if that's your implication. Judge Carmichael reclined in his chair. Well, Mr. Walsh, given the situation, you should be absolutely sure of your responses. Greg swallowed the knot in his throat. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. Avery pushed a little harder. Mr. Walsh, in light of today's evidence, would you say this misunderstanding affects your credibility? Greg squirmed awkwardly. I didn't mean for this to unfold like it has. I'm not accountable for Mr. Lim's decisions. The judge interjected with resolve. Intentions aside, Mr. Walsh, your standing is indeed under scrutiny. And in light of today's discoveries, this court is keenly focused on uncovering the truth. Greg found himself cornered, looking around only to catch the courtroom's collective judgment pressing down on him. With resignation, He accepted his predicament. "I'm aware, Your Honor." The judge gave a sharp nod. "Thank you, Mr. Walsh. You can step down." Greg returned to his seat, now carrying the weight of his choices heavier than before. Avery shot him a quick glance, her look a mix of fulfillment and professionalism. Silence enveloped the room as everyone braced for Judge Carmichael's next move. The judge's gaze turned icy as he said, "Mr. Walsh, please step forward and remember you're under oath." Greg made his way to the witness stand, almost brushing aside the bailiff in his hurry. Attempting to project confidence, he came off looking more like a man drowning and feeding his own panic. He sat, clutching the stand so hard his knuckles blanched. "Your Honor," Greg started, his voice dripping with false sincerity, as he insinuated that he'd been wronged. He focused entirely on the judge, ignoring both Avery and me. "This whole ordeal is a farce. All my wife and I have ever wanted was what's best for him," he added, with an accusatory finger pointed my way. "He's lost and suspicious, locking himself away in that little house for days, hiding his financial situation. He even accused me, of all people, of trying to steal from him. We just want to help him, protect him from himself." Greg tried to look pitiful, but it somehow came off as villainous. "He's not in the right frame of mind, Your Honor. He's completely out of touch with reality." Fierro saw his chance and jumped on it. "So, you're saying your concern was purely for his well-being?" "Absolutely," Greg replied, oozing with insincere concern. Fierro sat back, looking like he'd just narrowly avoided a train wreck. Avery stepped up with a calm yet incisive approach. "Mr. Walsh," she began softly, "you just testified that my client, Mr. Price, is delusional and paranoid." Greg puffed up with misplaced confidence. "Exactly, he's all mixed up." "And his confusion involves his finances?" she asked further. Greg nodded eagerly. "Yes, he doesn't understand money today. He's from another era." Avery nodded thoughtfully. "So, you're suggesting that his misunderstanding of today's financial landscape is why you think he's lost his grasp on reality?" Greg nodded again, all too sure of himself. "That's a big part of it." "So, when you asked him to invest $500,000 a few weeks ago, was that to test his mental state?" Greg's face tightened. "I was offering him an investment, a chance to share in family success." "You asked someone you claim is confused to hand over $500,000? Avery's tone was calm, but firm. Greg realized he was caught in a trap and tried to backtrack. His refusal just showed he wasn't thinking clearly. It was a great deal. A guaranteed 40% return in 6 months with my Ojai Resort project. There was no risk. He turned to the judge, trying to sound reasonable. "Your Honor," he turned it down. He claimed it was too risky. He's too out of touch to recognize an opportunity of a lifetime. That was when Melissa and I realized he had completely lost it. He couldn't make financial decisions anymore. His fears were costing him dearly. And there Greg was, digging his own grave, and Avery was poised to take advantage. "A golden opportunity, you said, Mr. Walsh?" Avery's voice was firm. "A surefire success?" Greg, still smug, responded, "That project is a gold mine." "Is that why it's now $50 million over budget with 16 contractor liens?" Avery pressed. Greg's face paled, and he stammered, That's a lie. That's confidential." "Not quite so confidential when you're in default, Mr. Walsh," Avery hammered back. "Your opportunity is a disaster, isn't it? Isn't it true your main lender, Citadel Apex Capital, declared you in breach of your loan and demanded $5 million just 10 days ago?" Greg was floundering, his mouth opening and closing without a sound. He glanced desperately at Fierro, who looked aghast. "A $5 million demand, Mr. Walsh, and you didn't have it. You're flat out broke, aren't you?" "No," Greg shouted, his composure crumbling. "It's just a temporary cash flow issue. The project is sound." "Is it really?" Avery was unrelenting. You were bankrupt, had no money, no credit, yet you somehow found the means to hire Mr. Fierro and scrounged up $25,000 in cash to pay off a disgraced dentist. She moved closer. Mr. Walsh, she cut in sharply, where did you get that cash? Greg stood there like a deer caught in the headlights. He glanced at Melissa, then toward the judge, speechless. Avery didn't miss a beat. You know exactly where, she said pointedly. You took it from a charity, didn't you? From the Isabel Price Foundation. Melissa let out a quiet gasp upon hearing her mom's name. Avery's voice resonated across the room. Isn't that right, Mr. Walsh? When you hit rock bottom, when everything fell apart, you leaned on your wife, had her endorse those checks. You convinced her to divert funds from her late mother's cancer charity. Greg shouted back, You can't prove any of that. But Avery was cool as a cucumber. She held up a stack of papers and said, $150,000 was moved from the charity to Walsh Holdings for so-called consulting fees. Another $80,000 was funneled to LA Premier Events, a shell company you own, for event planning. Altogether, that's $230,000 swiped from cancer research. Avery then turned her attention to Melissa. He didn't just lie in court, Melissa, she said gently. He lied to you too. Melissa couldn't hold it together anymore. She jumped up, shocked and furious, and yelled at Greg, You lied! You told me they were only admin fees. You promised everything was legit. You stole from my mom. Greg lost it after that. He couldn't maintain his smooth exterior any longer. Instead, he became just a desperate man on the attack. He stood up in the witness box, anger turning his face a dangerous shade of red. But instead of Avery or Melissa, he pointed at me. Shut up, Melissa, he howled, his voice breaking. Just shut up. This is all because of him. If he'd just given the money, none of this would have happened. It's his fault. The courtroom went wild. Melissa's sobs echoed off the walls while Greg kept yelling at her to be quiet, his face twisted in anger. Greg's lawyer, Fear, tried to cut in, but Judge Carmichael stopped him with a firm gesture. The judge hammered his gavel with authority, demanding order. Enough, he roared. Mr. Walsh, sit down now or face the consequences. And you, ma'am, control your emotions. Greg collapsed into his chair, his breath ragged. Melissa sat too, her cries reduced to muffled sobs. The room went still, except for the distant crackling of the bailiff's radio. Judge Carmichael directed his intense gaze toward me, his eyes softening to show what seemed like respect, or maybe curiosity. Mr. Price, he said with gravity, though his tone had calmed. In light of everything presented, including Mr. Walsh's unexpected admission, all I have before me is a petition. Is there anything you wish to say to defend your competence? I rose steadily, not needing support, unwavering in my stance. The fluorescent lights buzzed gently over the quiet room. I looked at Greg, then Melissa, and finally met the judge's gaze. Thank you, Your Honor, I said, my voice clear and strong in the stillness. I'm not here to argue my mental state or defend myself. My life story speaks for that. No, Your Honor, I continued with a brief pause. I am here not as a defender, but to file a criminal complaint. Fear leapt up, raising objections about grandstanding and inappropriate forums, but Judge Carmichael quelled him with a firm order. You opened this path, he declared. You brought this gentleman into my courtroom, questioning his sanity. Now the court will listen to him. Go on, Mr. Price. I turned my attention back to Greg, watching as his face shifted to one of dreaded realization. Mr. Walsh admitted a part of it, I stated plainly, as if listing facts. He confessed to taking $230,000 from a charitable foundation, specifically the Isabel Price Foundation. I redirected my gaze with intent. Choosing my words carefully, I addressed my daughter. In front of me, tears and mascara streaked her face, her eyes pleading. But it's not only him, I noted, making eye contact with her. He couldn't have done it alone. He needed someone's signature, the director's signature, from the foundation. I turned back to address the judge. Then, my daughter Melissa, you were the one who signed those checks. You took your mother's legacy, knowing all this, to support your husband's lavish lifestyle and collaborated in this weak attempt to grab my assets. Melissa let out a cry from deep within, a sound cloaked in utter despair. No, I wasn't in on it, she begged. He misled me. You did sign them, I noted, not accusing, simply stating a fact. Watching Melissa crumble, Greg suddenly felt a surge of fake confidence. He jumped up, causing his chair to crash to the floor. His laughter was high-pitched and a bit frantic, a grating sound. You can't touch me, he shouted, pointing at me accusingly. You're a nobody. You have nothing. What are you going to do? Complain? It's just my word against hers. And you're just an old fool, living in a guest house, penniless. You are nothing. His voice wavered, but he wore a cocky grin, thinking he had the upper hand. He thought I was powerless, that I'd lost everything except the clothes I wore. I just waited. I let his voice die out, let the silence fill the room again. I let him stand there, breathing heavily, like a dethroned king on a stage he demolished himself. Then I gave him a sly, chilly smile. Oh, about that, I said softly. I nodded slightly to Avery Hayes. She stood and retrieved a hefty stack of papers from her briefcase, wrapped in a blue legal binder. She didn't hand the documents to the judge or to me. No, she confidently walked over and laid them right in front of Gregory Walsh. What? What's this? Greg stuttered, looking at the imposing blue cover. That, Mr. Walsh, Avery said with unwavering authority, is an emergency notice of foreclosure and seizure. Greg's lawyer quickly snatched the document. As he scanned the first page, his face paled. This can't be, his lawyer said quietly, glaring at Avery. But this is from Citadel Apex Capital. There's no date. Greg grabbed the document from his lawyer, panic rising in his voice. What is happening? Looks like you missed some updates, Greg, I said casually. You were spot on when you defaulted on that $5 million loan from Citadel Apex. As you know, they were gearing up to take all your assets. A shame, huh? Greg's hands trembled as he tried to comprehend the document, his whole body shaking. This says the debt was transferred? Yep, I confirmed. They were keen to sell it off. Toxic paper, like you said. When you couldn't pay, I stepped in. I bought that debt, Greg. All of it. The loan, the collateral, everything. I stepped closer. You defaulted. Not on Citadel Apex, but on me. I let the truth sink in. I watched as his confidence crumbled bit by bit, as reality settled around him. And I added, am not as forgiving as Jim Callahan. I'm not granting any extensions. No renegotiations. I'm calling the debt due. Right now. Greg's eyes met mine, his mouth open, too shocked to speak. I gestured toward his mansion. The main house is now mine, I stated. The cars you drive, mine. Your entire Walsh Holdings operation, mine. Even the suit you're wearing right now belongs to me. I turned to Judge Carmichael, observing everything with astonishment. Your Honor, I said, finality ringing in my voice. This hearing about conservatorship is over. With Avery's documents in mind, I announced the start of the eviction hearing. Greg was finished. A man admitting his own guilt in court has little chance of escaping the consequences. After his outburst, this wasn't a trial. It was a sentencing. The evidence, the detailed file Avery and I assembled, was flawless, airtight, set to seal his fate, down to the bank transactions built on deceit and theft thanks to Greg, packed with fake invoices from his phony company, lies directly from his lips, and the irrefutable bank fraud case on the OG project. The evidence was staggering and all pointed directly to Greg. Desperately, he hired an even more expensive attorney, probably with money he didn't actually have. Their defense? Claim he was under unbearable stress and paint me as some evil puppet master who ensnared him. A feeble attempt, really. Like blaming the cheese for the trap when you're caught in it. When Judge Carmichael's comprehensive report rolled in, the district attorney didn't even flinch. They tried tempting him with a plea bargain to sidestep a full-blown trial, but he stood his ground, thinking he could still outsmart them. They went to trial, leaving him empty-handed. I didn't have to say a thing in court. Avery's detailed records, coupled with my deep dive into the finances, painted the entire picture. The jury took just an hour to deliver their verdict. Guilty, a dozen counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and severe embezzlement. The judge didn't spare him. Instead of a mild reprimand, he got a serious wake-up call, 10 years in a state prison, not some easy-going minimum security place. I watched Greg being led away, his fancy suits replaced by the unmistakable orange jumpsuit. He'd run out of loopholes. Melissa's case was more complex. She was my daughter, Isabel's very own child, yet she was caught up in it too. The proof against her was undeniable. Her signature on those checks meant every luxurious moment had been financed by money stolen from her mother's legacy. Her lawyer came to me, practically on his knees. "Mr. Price, she's a victim here. Greg manipulated her, mentally controlled her." I asked back, "Did Greg sign her name?" She was no child. She was an adult making her own choices. Her lawyer begged me to talk to the DA, to convince them she was just a misguided soul. I said no. This wasn't about getting even. It was about accountability. I'd let her dodge responsibility for too long, catered to her whims, and watched as she grew more callous. Rescuing her now, as everything crumbled, would cement my failure as a father. She needed to stand on her own 2 feet, own up to her choices. Facing similar charges as Greg, but wiser, she saw the writing on the wall and took a plea deal, admitting guilt to misusing charitable funds. Her sentence was lighter than Greg's. Despite the tears and stories about Greg's influence, the bank records didn't back her claims. She got 3 years of formal probation and had to pay back $230,000 to the Isabel Price Foundation. But there was more. The judge tacked on 2,000 hours of community service, specifically at Glenwood Gardens, caring for individuals with dementia and Alzheimer's. My daughter, who once plotted to declare me unfit to control my finances, would now care for those truly disoriented, unable to recognize themselves or their family. I wanted her there, right in the heart of the very deception she used against me, teaching her a lesson she hadn't learned before. Fast forward 6 months. The once bustling estate now stood peacefully. The grandiose mansion, with its lavish flair, was sold off, along with the land it occupied. Even the guest house, my own sanctuary, was sold. The proceeds were split, with half going towards revitalizing and expanding the Isabel Price Foundation. The money was now in safe hands. Half of it secured away in a trust for my grandson, Tyler, not to be touched until he was 25. Over at the guest house, now nearly bare save for a few stacked boxes, I was wrapping up some final packing in my secret office. The monitors were off, and the scalpel was ready to retire. I sensed someone on the porch. Not a knock, just a presence. I went to check and found Melissa at the door. She seemed different, not because of fancy clothes or spa visits, but from a weight she seemed to carry. Gone were the designer outfits. Instead, she wore a worn blue volunteer smock, Glenwood Gardens embroidered on it. Her hair was pulled back, and her face felt tired and aged, like she'd lived years in a short span. The usual entitlement, the arrogance, had vanished. It was all burned away. Her hands, once perfectly manicured, were now calloused and worn. She just stood there in the doorway, quietly watching as I sealed up the last box. When she finally spoke, her voice was different than what I was used to, hoarse and quiet, like all the life had been sucked out of it. "Why?" she asked. I stopped packing, keeping my back turned. "Why what, Melissa?" Her words shook, not with sadness, but with a weary sort of anger. "Why did you let it get so bad? You knew, right? You're him. You knew what Greg was doing, and still, when Greg came asking for $500,000, you didn't stop him. You could have said no, shown me the papers. You could have warned me." Her voice wavered, with one solitary tear of anger rolling down her cheek. "But you didn't. You watched us do it all. You watched me sign those checks, file that lawsuit, and you just stood by, letting us fall apart. You didn't need to ruin us or send him to jail. You didn't have to do this to me." She gestured to her cheap uniform. "You wanted us to pay." I sealed the box and turned to her. "If I had stopped you, Melissa," I said, my voice steady, "you wouldn't have learned anything. You'd have just resented me, thought I was some controlling old fool. Then you would have gone right back to him, swallowing his next lie, finding another way to funnel money to him. You would have kept draining your mother's foundation money with gala after gala. I didn't stop you. I just let you be you." I nodded toward my old desk. "Remember when you were 10 and took $50 from your mom's purse for a toy she said you couldn't have?" Melissa flinched, eyes widening as she recalled it. "Isabel knew it was you," I went on. "She cried for an hour in the bathroom, feeling like she failed you as a mom, but afterwards she gave you a hug, didn't scold you, and quietly returned $50 of her own money. Her heart was kind. She wanted peace." I met her gaze, unwavering. "I believe in harmony, in making sure actions have consequences. You never faced consequences for that theft, so you graduated to bigger things. Neither you nor Greg respected me, and above all, you didn't respect your mother's memory. You didn't just cross a line, you erased it, stomping on her legacy for things like a swimming pool." She was out of words, just tears left. "You didn't destroy yourselves," I said to her. "That happened long ago. You were empty in every way imaginable. I just ensured you got the invoice for it." I picked up an envelope from the desk and handed it over. "Here's an address for a studio apartment in Burbank. The rent's covered for 3 months. There's a bus pass in there, too. After that, it's up to you. The accounts are balanced now." She took the envelope, her hand trembling, and gave me one last look, searching for something. What it was, I didn't know. Maybe her father, but he was gone. She left. As I watched her walk away, it struck me that in my 71 years, I'd retired twice, first from work and then from being that quiet, agreeable old man. That day in court, when I picked up a pen again, I realized something important. I'm Nathaniel Price, and I finally got my life in order. The whole mess taught me a harsh lesson. I learned that staying silent shouldn't be considered weakness. For years, my love for my family blinded me to their lack of respect for me. I used to view patience as a virtue, but it hit me that patience without firm boundaries just invites people to take advantage of you. True strength isn't about being heard above everyone else. It's about choosing when to act and having the patience to wait until then. I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted accountability. Sometimes, the strongest form of love for yourself, and even others, is when you step up and reset the scales.